Books, books. I like books. I'm gonna read them all. Hi readers, Chris here. Welcome to my channel where I review fantasy and some other books, and I have some little furry friends that may or may not make an appearance in this video. Before I jump in today, I want to mention that the GoFundMe for Pax Panic is still going on. I can't believe how much money we've raised so far. It's so great to see the outpouring of support from the BookTube community. It's still open, it's still ongoing. That's why I am continuing to wear green for PAX. I will put that in the description box below if you are interested in checking it out. She actually just put in an update, I think, earlier today on how her progress was going, which was really nice to see. On to today's topic, where I'm going to be counting down the top 10 worst books of 2022. And unlike what I said about the best book list, that list was really hard. This list was super easy. It was super easy to look back through all the books I've read this year and gone, yep, that was the worst one. Yep, that was the worst one. Yep, that was the worst one. Yep. A lot of these books I've already unhauled, so if I don't have the physical copy, I will put a picture up. But I'm going to jump right in with number 10, which is The Cursed Clones by Adam Houls. Houls? I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce the name. Now, I do feel bad about putting this book on the list. I do, because this is an indie book. It's by an indie author, and I do feel really bad about it. If you remember when I read this book, I did not know going into this book that this book was the third book in like a trilogy. I went in thinking that it was like the first one. So I really had no idea that there was some characters set up and plot stuff that had gone on before. I was totally lost, didn't know who the characters were, couldn't connect. Now, in my defense, there's nothing on the cover or even in the description that really explains that this is like the third book in a trilogy. So unless I physically went on like Amazon and looked it up, I would not have known that. And again, this book was given to me, and when it was given to me, I was not told that. So part of me feels very bad because it is partly my fault. However, at the end of the day, I can't help how I felt when I was reading it. So unfortunately, that's why it ended up on this list. The 9th worst book of 2022 is going to be Funeral Girl by Emma K. Oland. This is another book that I feel bad about putting on this list because it was given to me. It was given to me by a friend over on Bookstagram who sent it to me out of the kindness of their heart, thinking that it might be something I would enjoy. And really all signs pointed to it being something I would enjoy. It's about a young girl who works in a funeral home. She sees ghosts. She can talk to them. I love dark stories and supernatural and like macabre type things. Like it seemed like the perfect story for me. However, the plot did not go in the direction that I thought it was going to go. I've said this before when I reviewed the book, but I thought that this was going to be like a whodunit murder mystery. And instead, it was like this deep exploration of grief, of having anxiety about death and the fear of death. And because it wasn't what I was expecting, I was disappointed. Now, someone else might have different expectations and go into this book and really appreciate it. Unfortunately, that just wasn't me. So again, I do feel bad about putting it on this list a little bit, but at the end of the day, I can't help how I felt when I was reading it. So if there was one thing I would say, this book is already published, but I would say I would maybe change the description of this book a little bit to maybe not focus so much on like the murder, like the mystery part of it, but more on the like anxiety part of it. Because I feel like the book doesn't really describe that a lot. So it's not 100% my fault. It's not 100% my fault, or at least I don't think it is. You can let me know what you think. The 8th worst book of 2022 is going to be Jade, Fire Gold by June C.L. Tan. I had high hopes going into this book because, I mean, this book is gorgeous. It's got these beautiful green sprayed edges. It's got this awesome reverse dust jacket. lovely foil on the cover, super cool. We've got some magical creatures, a dragon, and a phoenix. I had really high expectations and hopes going into this book. But I just could not connect with it. I just could not connect with the characters. I felt like the main female character in the beginning of this book, she's like this shy, kind of timid, like uncertain type character. And then like all of a sudden, like a quarter of the way through, she like completely, her whole personality completely changes. It totally threw me off. Like, and I never could get back into it after that. So even though I read the rest of the book, like it has a decent plot, but I couldn't connect with the characters. I'm very much like I need strong characters to connect with a story. I can forgive a plot and I can forgive world building if there's strong characters, and this book just did not have it, for me anyway. So that is why, unfortunately, Jade Fire Gold ended up on this list. The 7th worst book of 2022 is going to be Prince of Thorns by Mark Lawrence. This was a buddy read that I did with David over at David's Book Reviews way back earlier in 2022. It was kind of the first buddy read that we ever did together, and it was my attempt to like dip my toe further into grim, dark fantasy. Back in 2022, I made that one of my goals. Like, I wanted to read more grim, dark fantasy, and he was like, hey, I've got this book, this author. He's supposed to be a really popular, like, grim, dark fantasy author. Let's try this book out. Both and him didn't like the book that much. I think he liked it slightly better than me, but for me personally, I couldn't connect with it. Similar to what I said about some of the other books, I just felt the characters were really not well developed. The main character in this story is supposed to be a very young boy. He's only like 12, 15 maybe-ish when the book starts, but he acts like a very older man. And I think it would have been a very interesting story to have such a young boy be so like violent and like battle hardened and like all of this stuff. I think that could have been really interesting, but the book didn't do that. It treated him like he was a full grown man. He walked, talked, acted. The only way that you would even know that he was a child is because like other people mention it. So again, this is an example of show, don't tell. The book should have shown me in a way that I would be able to recognize that this was a young boy, not just tell me, because again, it didn't work for me. So I won't be reading the rest of the series. Maybe I'll try a different Mark Lawrence series at some point. We'll see. But that is why Prince of Thorns ended up on my list. The 6th worst book of 2022 is going to be Beautiful Wild by Anna Gabberson. Again, this is a book that I read very early in 2022. And it was actually a book that came in a book box, one I previously used to subscribe to, which was Spearcraft. Some of you may remember that. So I didn't know much about the book other than it was a romance. Now, I don't read a ton of romance, and that doesn't mean I don't like romance. It's just that I like fantasy and Stephen King and all that stuff better. However, I do like stories that are well-rounded, which means I usually like if there is a romantic element in the story. This romance, however, I feel like hits every single stereotype that you would possibly think about a romance. Like, it was so stereotypical. The love was like, I don't know, it was super corny, super stereotypical. It wasn't really funny. There wasn't anything special about it. And all the characters were like these wealthy type people, but it's not like in Bridgerton where they're wealthy, but like they're super charismatic, so you want to know what happens to them. The characters in this story were super wealthy to the point where it just came off as like privileged and annoying, if that makes any sense. So I didn't care for this book. I just kind of rolled my eyes the entire time that I was reading it. Definitely not something that I would recommend to anyone. There's definitely way better romances out there for sure. even Twilight's a better romance than this, and that's saying something. So that's why this ended up on my list. The fifth worst book for 2022 is another one that I'm very sad about, and that's going to be A Forgery of Roses by Jessica Olsen. This is a book that I had very high hopes for, very high expectations, and I'd say through the first half of the book, like, I was enjoying it. I thought this book had an interesting setup where we're in a world where people use art as a form of magic. So our character is a young girl, and she can paint and use her paintings to do different things magically. So for example, if you got injured, let's say you got like a paper cut, she could do a painting and heal that for you. Now, the setup of the story is there's like a rich family that has someone that died in the family, and they hire her to try and like paint this person back to life. And this is where the book lost me, because the book tries to explain how it's possible to use magic to alter someone's appearance, but then also use magic to bring someone back to life. The mechanics of it did not make any sense. They did not make any sense to me. And sometimes, again, when there's strong plots and strong characters, I might have been able to just switch my brain off and like just go with it. But for some reason, I couldn't. I could not switch my brain off in this story. I could not. Because I think the book actually does try to explain the logistics. It tries to. And instead of just like doing it and moving on, it really tries to explain the details of how that would work. And it did not work for me. It did not work for me at all, which made reading like the back half of this book incredibly frustrating. So unfortunately, A Forgery of Roses, one of the more frustrating reads last year, hence why it ended up on my list. Number 4 is an even more frustrating read, and that's going to be Among the Beasts and Briars by Ashley Poston. Again, another book that I read early in 2022 that through 75% of the book, through most of the book, I actually really enjoyed it. You know, it's about this young girl. She lives in this kingdom that's at the edge of this like cursed forest, like no one's supposed to go in the forest, and all of a sudden something happens. She has to go into the forest and kind of search for this like mysterious magical place so she can get some help in like saving the kingdom from the forest. And it's all this stuff. It's really cool. There's a fox character that's really cool. Like, there are so many good things about this story. It's magical. It's like a fairy tale. There's some great characters in here. And I was going along with the plot, and then all of a sudden the book just ends. I mean, legit, it just ends. And then like she's about to have like the quote unquote final battle in the book, and then all of a sudden the book cuts to like a year later where all these things have changed, and it's like, what just happened? What just happened? I have no idea. This book literally just ended, like just dropped off a cliff, and I absolutely hate that. I hate that. The book did not wrap up anything. It didn't say what happened to these characters or what's going on now. It just is clearly like setting up for a second book, and oh my god. Oh, it actually like it made my heart rate go up. Like, it legit made me angry. So that is why Among the Beasts and Briars, which could have been a great book, has one of the worst endings I've ever read. That's why it's on my list. As bad as that ending was, I think I have one that might be even worse, and that is my number 3 worst book of 2022, The Turn of the Key by Ruth Ware. Now, full disclosure, I don't read a lot of murder mysteries and thrillers other than the occasional one maybe Stephen King would do. So this is really outside of my comfort zone. But Ruth Ware is a popular author, and I wanted to give it a try. And again, this was another book that in the beginning, I was really interested in what was going on. This woman gets hired as a nanny to go babysit these kids in this mysterious house that has all this like technology in it. she's left alone with these children super, super quick, like more quick than she should have been. And then all of a sudden, all these weird things start going on in the house, and you don't really know as the reader, is it in her head? Is someone messing with her? Is the house, are things going off because there's something supernatural going on? You don't really know. And then you get to the end and you find out that you basically knew nothing the whole time. You basically knew nothing. The main character was not who she said she was the whole time. And it's really weird. It's got a really weird ending. It made no sense to me. They tried to explain in like not even in an end chapter, but like in an epilogue, like who really did the murder. And it made no sense to me. It made no sense. It just made reading the entire book feel like a waste of time. It felt like a waste of time, and which is a shame because, like I said, in the beginning of the book, I thought it was pretty good. Like, I thought it was pretty engaging, but oh man. This book definitely wins the award for, like, worst ending of all time. I mean, Among the Beast and Briars also had one of the worst endings, but I think this one is slightly worse than the other one, which is why I put this one higher on my list. So that brings me to the top 2 worst books of 2022, which in my opinion are both completely awful books. But number 2 is going to be Wolf Hall by Hilary Mantel. I could tell early on reading that book that it was not for me. Like, I could tell because her writing style is very unique. And it just was not for me. However, because I do not DNF, I kept reading it. I shouldn't have. I really should not have, but I did. Her writing, like, switches tenses back and forth, but does it in a way where, like, you never know who's talking or what's going on. Like, she switches from, like, first person to third to, third, omni. Like, it switches tenses so often that it kind of makes your head, like, feel muddled. Like, you don't even understand what you're reading. I love, like, the Tudor England time period. That's why I'm such a big fan of Philippa Gregory and, like, her historical fiction from that time period. I love stories about Henry VIII and his wives and all the craziness. So going into this book, I was really interested because Thomas Cromwell is a very interesting character from that time period, and I wanted to know more about him and how this story would, like, address things from his point of view. Oh my god. It made no sense to me. It was a slog to read. It honestly, it like hurt me. It was like painful. Every time I picked up the book, I was like, ugh, why am I reading this? Why am I doing it? But I did because I'm a glutton for punishment and I don't DNF. But man, I regret reading that book. I so regret it. So Wolf Hall, Hilary Mantel, that book was so bad that I just completely unhauled all of my Hilary Mantel books because I had the other ones she wrote. I do not want to read those. I don't want to read them. I don't know if I'll ever read anything from her again, even if she publishes something new. I don't think it's for me. Hey, her style might work for other people. It just did not work for me at all. And that brings me to my number 1 worst book of 2022, a book that is truly awful, a book that made me so angry that I literally almost threw it across the room, and that is Anthem by Noah Hawley. This is another book that I read early in 2022, and again, I should have DNF'd this book. I should have, but I did not. I was really excited about this book when it came out, really excited, because I am familiar with Noah Hawley's work as a screenwriter. In case you're not familiar, he's done like Legion on FX, which is like an X-Men show. He's written for Fargo. Like, he's written a lot of things that I personally really liked. So when I saw that he was writing a book that's supposed to be like a new age fantasy, but kind of in the real world, that kind of addresses like current topics and themes and current stuff going on in the world, I was like, yes, I'm here for it. Oh man, this sounds really good. I can't wait to see what he says and what he does. And what he did was basically lecture the reader, myself, reading the book, about politics. Yes, that's right. This entire book, which is part fantasy, part science fiction, part whatever, is all about politics. Oh man, I fell for it. I have never felt so like duped and so deceived by a book as I felt about Anthem. This book is so preachy and so bad that literally the middle of the book, Noah Hawley, the author, stopped the story and addresses you, the reader, to explain what the book is about. Because he thinks that you are so dumb, you reading this book are so dumb that he needs to explain to you what you're reading, or else you're not going to understand the rest of it. I should have DNF'd at that point. I remember reading it and like immediately going to my husband and being like, you are not going to believe this. You are not going to believe this. Like, I just can't. Like, wow. I have never read a book that the author is so pretentious that he needs to explain to you what his book is about. Wow. I mean, yikes. I really can't think of in my head, like, who would enjoy reading this book? Like, who would want that? Who wants to just be, like, preached to and told that they're stupid because they don't understand what the author's trying to say? I don't know. I have never experienced that reading until I read Anthem, so there's no contest. It's the worst book of 2022, and honestly, I think it might be the worst book I've ever read, in that it's the most infuriating book I've ever read. So there you have it. Those are the worst books from 2022. And of course, these are just all my opinions, not necessarily the worst written. But Meeper says, you should listen to me. I read all these stinkers so that you don't have to. As always, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you're not already, please subscribe to my channel for more bookish videos coming your way soon. All right, everyone. Happy reading. Can you say happy reading? Can you say happy reading?